Welcome to Pollen Weather by Pollen Wise.
It's Monday, June 22nd, and you're listening to the only place for regular news and updates on airborne allergens. It's the middle of grass season, and things are looking actually quite nice here. If we look at the forecasted highs for pollen for today, most of the country is more or less in the clear. We've got a lot of orange. We've also got a lot of yellow, which is moderate, and we've even got one low over there on the East Coast. There are some highs predicted, very high pollen levels predicted in southern Ohio, southern Alabama, and southern Arizona. Mold is more or less the same story. This is mostly due to the drying out effect that we have as summer wears on for most regions. Now, some of you have received some decent precipitation and will bounce back, especially on the eastern half of the United States. But for now, things are looking relatively clear. The highest forecasted high being 74 in southern Arizona, which is definitely high enough to make people suffer. Let's overlay precipitation on top of forecasted highs for pollen. You can see there's a nice big storm in the upper Midwest, as well as Arkansas and Louisiana. Going to get some decent precipitation out of those storms, and that's pretty good for cleaning out the air. If you get a quarter inch in less than an hour, you can expect the air to be clean for the day. And I always say a 10 a.m. heavy rainfall event is the best thing that can happen to your day, especially if things clear up and become sunny, because you don't have to worry about pollen in most cases. For gusts and wind speed across the country, we're seeing some predicted gusty conditions in Texas, as well as Nebraska and South Dakota. So a good example of gusty conditions making pollen rise was Friday night in Dallas-Fort Worth area. Wind speeds were gusting at 40 miles an hour at 8 p.m. And I'll show you a frame from our patented device that counts airborne pollen and mold. Here's around 7:30 p.m. on Friday night, and you can see that more or less clear. There are very few particles in this frame. Now look an hour later at 8:30, when there were lots of particles in the air and definitely pollen in there that we were collecting. This is what happens when wind starts to gust. The pollen is either being ripped off of the plants or is just being picked up off of the ground. And truly, we have a lot of pollen that has settled on the ground from this spring and early summer. So just keep in mind when we're looking at these wind gusts that these really are recipes for elevated pollen levels. And they can happen anytime you have gusty conditions. Since grass season is tapering off, and I do encourage everyone to do a pollen walk from time to time to kind of get a feel for what the conditions are in your area, I just want to talk about grass season ending. On my pollen walk this morning, I passed a wheat field that is starting to dry out, and so it's starting to go golden or amber, right? Amber waves of grain. All grasses that release pollen have a flower, much like wheat or any other grain. And that flower, when it turns buff-colored or golden or amber or whatever you want to call it, that means that the season for pollen release has passed for that particular plant. So as I was looking at this field of grain, most of it has become golden or at least buff-colored. There's a little bit of green left out there, and so you could expect that pollen is being released in various places across that field. Not that wheat is a very significant pollinator. It does release pollen, but it isn't considered one of the great sources of airborne allergens. I'm going to end on the temperature map. Going to be a hot, nice day for most of the country. Check the Pollen Wise app for updates on pollen and mold levels in your area.